Hey guys, Pete here. This will be my breakdown for Lovecraft Country Season 1, Episode 3. Holy Ghost, genre hops as we return to Chicago and delivers a self-contained haunted house tale. In Lovecraft Country fashion, the ghosts inside the house are rivaled by the real-world racism our characters are up against in the world outside its walls. And let's not forget the creepy secret society warlock stuff they encountered in the last episode. Last week I made a video explaining some things about that, relying on the source material. This week I don't think I can do that without giving things away, so I'll do a normal recap with some thoughts about what I think about the adaptation at the end. This will contain spoilers for the first 3 episodes, so if you're not caught up that far, then this video won't be for you. Okay, so what happened this week and what did we learn? We got a title screen that said, in the summer of 1955, a group of Negro men and women moved into a house on the north side of Chicago. 10 days later, 3 people went missing inside the house, never to be seen again. This lays things out and sets up a countdown of the days until we get to number 10. It's been a few weeks since the gang traveled to Ardham, where Uncle George met his demise. Back in Chicago, Tick has been staying at his uncle's house, where it feels like he's worn out his welcome with Aunt Hippolyta. We'll learn that they decided to keep the supernatural aspects of what happened on their trip a secret, and I guess we can't blame them. But Hippolyta senses that they aren't telling her the whole story, which leads to tension and Tick going to ask Montrose if he can stay with him. Montrose is dealing with things in his own way, which looks to involve a lot of drinking, and that leads to him doing a pretty good job of laying out the situation. He says, "You want us to tell them wizards are real, that white people got magic on their side." When Tick mentions he thinks Uncle George might want his family to know the truth, Montrose continues, "Hippolyta can't do shit, we can't do shit." And it is where they're at. Telling Hippolyta and Diana what happened to George might give them some kind of peace of mind, but there still wouldn't be anything anyone could do about it, so maybe ignorance about the secret society and their Lovecraftian monsters is actually bliss in this case. Letitia is also dealing with things in her own way, which turns out to be buying a house in an all-white neighborhood, pioneering. She also makes a decision to keep the truth about what happened in Ardham from her sister Ruby, and goes one step further when keeping the truth about where she got the money to buy the house. Instead, she convinces Ruby to move in with her so that they can begin to heal their relationship, which does seem like something that she wants to do, but later in the episodes things will fall apart when Ruby finds out that she didn't win the money by playing the numbers. The house in question turns out to be a handful in a couple of different ways. First, the fact that it's haunted probably played a big part in how Leti was able to afford it, and establishing a boarding house for black people in an all-white neighborhood in 1950s Chicago isn't something the neighbors are ready to let go unnoticed. These are the 2 things Leti is up against, and to be clear, this is a Leti episode, and both of these things come at her at the same time. On the haunted house side, things escalate quickly. While in bed, something that Leti can't see is pulling at her sheets. She finds herself sweating when she wakes up, and that leads her to check the boiler in the basement, where she hears what sounds like someone trying to escape from yet another room below. As the idea that her new house is haunted is dawning on her, she's also putting up with the fact that the white neighbors are trying to intimidate her. Everything comes to a head at a housewarming party where someone decides to burn a cross on the front lawn to let Leti and her housemates know how they really feel. It's enough to get Leti out there showing how she really feels. She grabs a bat, unleashes on the cars parked out front, silencing the blowing horns that neighbors have been using to terrorize them since they first moved in. It's the first of 2 scenes where we see Letitia fucking Lewis in all her glory. And I've got to mention that Jurnee Smollett really rises to the occasion here. It's a great scene and it is put together really well. Of course, Leti doesn't live in the world where if someone comes to your house and burns a cross out front, you'd be forgiven for losing your temper. When the police arrive, they're not there to investigate the act of terrorism, but instead take her into custody and give her a rough ride with another helping of intimidation. On top of clearly enjoying the power he has over Leti, the officer has some questions about the house. He asks her if anything weird has been going on inside, and if someone told her to buy the Winthrop house in the first place. He can sense that she doesn't know what he's talking about, so he tells her that the police found the parts of 8 dead black people in the basement, using the N-word to drive home the idea that he won't lose any sleep if the same thing happened to the current occupants. The next day, she meets the ghost of the previous homeowner face to face, or at least she inadvertently conjures his face, which tells her to get out of his house. This leads her to investigate, where she learns that the head belongs to a fired university professor named Hiram Epstein. He was the last person who lived there. He had a connection to the police officer who was asking her questions, and this probably involved human test subjects for the kind of experiments that Epstein got fired over. Leti lays out everything she's learned to Tick, who has also moved into the house at this point. She hasn't been able to learn anything about how the house came to be known as the Winthrop house, but she has identified the 8 victims whose bodies were found in the basement. He tells her it's time to move out, but she isn't convinced. She says, "I thought the world was one way and I found out it isn't. It terrifies me. But I can't live in fear. I won't. I gotta face this world head on and stake my claim in it." She reaches out for the help of what I guess you would describe as a medium. There may be some voodoo stuff going on, they don't really make it clear. But they go to work trying to expel Epstein's spirit from the house, and during the chanting, he starts to fight back. He's able to take control of the medium's body and then Tick's. As he's coming for Leti, things get really good. She yells out the names of the 8 victims saying, "You're not dead yet, you can still fight," and we see them all start to materialize as they were during the haunting. They start chanting together, forming a circle, and we see them transform back into their human forms as Leti yells, "Get the fuck out of my house." As she's successfully casting the spirits out, 3 of the white kids from the neighborhood break in. The house itself gets rid of them, killing 2 with the radiator and decapitating 1 with the elevator. All of this works really well with the basement scene and Smollett's performance stealing the show. Before the episode comes to a close, we get a glimpse of the elevator continuing to descend below the normal floors after Leti gets out of it. We see what looks like the language of Adam lighting up on the walls until it opens up, revealing the bodies of the dead white intruders. Beyond them, we see a man-made cave littered with skeletons that, by their nature, look to have been there for a very long time. At the end, we learn that Tick was doing an investigation of his own. He figures out that Christina Braithwaite orchestrated everything behind the scenes, and he tracks her down at the realtor's office that she used. He pulls a gun with the intention of shooting her, but isn't able to do it as she's protected by a spell. She explains that this was her father's claim to fame, and that he believed if you couldn't be harmed, you could live forever. Unfortunately, he had to let down his guard during the ceremony when he tried to enter the Garden of Eden, and well, that was long enough to undermine the whole immortality angle. After she makes it clear that she's learned some things from Daddy, we learn some important information. All of the spells the sons of Adam have mastered came from one chapter of the Book of Names that Titus passed down. The book itself is gone, which was hinted at in the last episode when we saw the vision of Hannah running away carrying it. Horatio Winthrop was also a founding member of the group. Christina ponders out loud, imagine the possibilities if Horatio Winthrop's pages were to be found. The language of Adam could finally be decoded in its entirety. Then she gives Tick her number and tells him to get in touch when he's ready to learn more about their family's history. On the way out, she tells him to be smarter. After all, he can't just go around killing white women. And that's where the episode ends. So things are starting to take shape as far as Christina's motivations. I mentioned in my last video that she probably had something to do with the ceremony going wrong. Now that we see that she's doing all this after the fact, it sure looks like her father was probably in the way of what she's trying to do. Getting Leti into this house, which belonged to one of the original members of the Sons of Adam, would indicate that she's trying to find those pages that she mentioned to Tick. So even though they made it out of the situation in Ardham, they're still important to whatever these secret society warlock types are trying to do. So I think it was a pretty good episode. I like the show's version of Leti, even if I'm a little uncertain about where things are headed after she hooked up with Tick. The core elements pertaining to who she is are all there, and the performance really elevates things. I think it is a better episode than the last one. The pacing and transitions still seem a little off, but I think they moved from one story to the next in a way that worked. I wasn't a fan of the Epstein head coming up through the ground scene, but then really enjoyed the basketball player with the baby's head and the whole sequence where Leti managed to cast the spirits out. It's hard for me to look at it without comparing it to the source material and the expectations that go along with having read it. I was hoping they were going to build the story out and go deeper with things, but they decided to lean into the monster of the week format, which is probably what I liked least about the book. I'm still interested to see where it goes from here, though. I will mention that they cut out a pretty important part of the haunted house story, and that makes me believe that they will probably circle back to it, and that might mean that they're going to blend the upcoming stories together. We only got a little bit of Hippolyta, Diana, and Montrose in this episode since they didn't play a big part in what Leti was going through at the house. I should mention that we saw Hippolyta find a model of the solar system which definitely caught her interest. We also saw Diana and her friends playing with a Ouija board. When they asked who they were speaking to, it spelled George, which might be her dad trying to contact her. But what it spelled after wasn't completely clear. It's moving on its own and it spells out the word dead, but there's also more letters that we don't see on the screen. This stuff might have seemed a little bit out of place, but don't worry. You probably noticed by now that each story sort of focuses on a particular character, and just because they didn't play a big part in this story doesn't mean they aren't important. And with that, I'll leave it there. Let me know in the comments what you thought about episode 3. Do you like the Monster of the Week style, or were you hoping for something more akin to Prestige TV, for lack of a better term? Did you like the bat scene, or did you like Leti bringing the spirits together better? Or if not one of those, then what was your favorite scene? Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you soon.